Cathaoirleach, that's the order of business for the day, but I think it would be remiss of the House if we didn't place on record and acknowledge the fact that Jimmy Walsh of the Irish Times, the reporter who has covered this House so well for many years, is retiring tomorrow. Jimmy is one of the reporters in his fledgling days who covered the visit of President Kennedy to Ireland, and he joined the press corps in the Houses of the Oireachtas over 40 years ago, starting initially in the Dáil, covering Dáil proceedings, and then covering Seanad proceedings for over 20 years. Jimmy was the old-style reporter with his notebook and pen and typewriter and shorthand, and I believe he had excellent shorthand. And what amazed me about Jimmy always, I think, was his retention and his memory of details that happened many, many years ago. He's covered this House with distinction. I think we owe him a debt of gratitude for his honest and accurate reporting of events in this House. He would certainly be missed by all of us. Whether the paper will replace Jimmy or not, I don't know. But I think it's only right and proper that we would acknowledge the work that he has done in covering events here. And I hope that when he does retire tomorrow, that he won't cut all ties with the House, that he will come back and visit us on regular intervals. And I know that he was presented with a pass for the House up to 2016 by the Ceann Comhairle yesterday. So there's no reason why he won't be in a position to visit us at regular intervals, and we'll certainly look forward to his company in that time. So I'd like to place on record, as I said, our gratitude and thank Jimmy for his coverage and his work, and indeed the friendships that he's built up over many years in the House. Thank you, Cathaoirleach.
Yeah. I think it would be in this very I was going to formally acknowledge the presence of the mighty Jimmy in the gallery on this very special occasion, but I think the round of applause beat me to the cue, and I'll now continue with the order of business and call on Senator McSharry.
Thanks very much, Cathaoirleach. And before normal hostilities begin, our group would like to also acknowledge the true greatness of our friend, and I think a great friend of the House in Jimmy Walsh. I think he has always shown himself in my 11 years here, and I think that they're a good a case to examine of an experience of all of us, and that's an innately decent man who has been a great friend to this House, the only one it has had, and I think that from a reportage and journalism perspective is a simple fact that's widely acknowledged, and I think the House has been extremely lucky to have the expertise of Jimmy Walsh and the honesty and professionalism that he always showed in reporting. For me, on a personal level, Jimmy is the true definition of the honourable profession and tradition of journalism in reporting the facts as they should be reported, rather than so often in the so-called more modern journalists who like to put a particular complexion on one side or the other of the facts. That's something that's foreign to Jimmy in our view and in our experience, and I think that it's something that younger or so-called more modern journalism could look to Jimmy and learn a little bit from how well the business was done over the years. He'll certainly be missed. I would invite the leader, perhaps the Taoiseach might like to seize the opportunity with one of the Taoiseach's 11 vacant to make Jimmy a member of the House. God knows he'd certainly have the experience, having reported it so well over the years, to make a very valuable contribution. In a sentence, as far as the Fianna Fáil group are concerned, Jimmy Walsh all graces and no airs. We hope you enjoy your retirement, but hope that you will be a very, very regular visitor here in the House. Cathaoirleach, will I continue with the points I wanted to raise now, or do you intend to?
No, I think we'll just do the order of business. And I should also remind people that last week a number of senators, I think 9, spoke glowingly of Jimmy Walsh, and I think I don't want to repeat that. I think those who haven't mentioned him, particularly the leaders of the groups, I'll obviously allow it a latitude to be fair. So you can continue now with the...
Leader, just on another issue, I'd ask again. I realise that the time is short with the Easter break and so on, but I think an urgent debate is required on the issue of the insolvency guidelines that are out there, how they're going to be dealt with by the Insolvency Service. There seems to be mixed messages coming from government. There seems to be media reported that is extremely worrying. At the weekend we saw where one particular newspaper was indicating that women in particular would be forced to give up their work if there was a situation that childcare could not be afforded. The Taoiseach on Monday said, and I'm quoting, "I would find it quite incredible that somebody would say that you were required to give up work in order to meet these changes." That gave some hope and solace to the many women throughout the country who were concerned by reading the Sunday papers in this regard, only to be dashed yesterday where we have Minister Varadkar saying that clearly if women who were not in a position to pay for childcare, they would have to give up their job. We think this is fundamentally wrong. We think it's reminiscent of a day where when women were blessed with pregnancy, that they were forced to leave the civil service. And women can't be helped from wondering, what is the plan within this government in terms of assisting women in the workforce? We've had cuts to childcare. We've had taxation of maternity benefit. Now we have the suggestion that if you can't afford childcare, you may give up your job, and a senior government minister seems to be contradicting the Taoiseach in that yesterday. One wonders, what is next? Are we to take the vote off women altogether? I think it's a very, very worrying situation, and I do feel, in the interests of the women of Ireland, I think we need to have a debate and we need to have absolute clarity on this issue, because we can't have senior cabinet ministers and the Taoiseach contradicting each other on this issue. Nor do I think it's appropriate that any government should set up an insolvency service that would preside over any situation that would force women to stay at home rather than supporting them in the workforce and providing the necessary childcare, which I would imagine Minister Frances Fitzgerald would like to do, indeed having indicated that she'd like to see the provision of a second preschool year free. And I think that she should press ahead with that as a matter of urgency, rather than the kind of reportage we've seen in recent days about suggesting that women have to give up their work. Finally, can I say, just as a comment, with reports today following the Garda conference, where an alleged walkout of a number of members by way of protest may be dealt with in terms of a disciplinary action against them. I think that would be highly regrettable. I think members of the Gardaí have very limited tools at their disposal to highlight the difficulties that they have at any one time, and I think surely within the confines of their own conference they should be entitled to register that protest in such a peaceful and meaningful way. And I would regret very much if the Garda Commissioner felt it necessary to proceed to take disciplinary action against those members. Thank you.
Senator Batchik, Margaret.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. And I too would like to begin just by paying tribute to Jimmy Walsh, and on the occasion this week of his retirement. I attended, as did I think most of us here, the wonderful event yesterday to celebrate his distinguished career, and we all heard there not only about the excellent shorthand that the leader has referred to, but indeed about the very many experiences and the great distinction with which he had covered not only the Seanad, but before that many other events, including of course the visit of President Kennedy, which he spoke about so graphically, and indeed the visit of President Reagan, which he spoke about so eloquently and wittily. He has indeed, his reports are noted for being honest, for being accurate, but also for being impartial, and I think all of us would agree on that, and that his reporting has really done the Seanad and the institution of Leinster House, I think, a great service in giving a very fair account of what in fact goes on in here, often overlooked by other papers and by other media outlets. I know all of us will miss not only his excellent reporting, but also the regular wit and banter that we experience when we bump into Jimmy in the corridor. And I would describe Jimmy as a true raconteur, as a true gentleman, and as somebody who I will personally miss greatly. And I just want to express that a tribute to him on my own behalf, on behalf of the Labour group, and express also my gratitude to him for the long service he has given in reporting on the Seanad. And I'd just like to wish him and his family very well indeed on what is not only retirement, but let's hope the next stage of a very distinguished career, and perhaps the publication of a memoir with some of those experiences and anecdotes recounted for the greater enjoyment of the public. I think we would all welcome that. Thank you very much, Jimmy. Could I also just welcome the report today, the launch today of the Justice Committee report on penal reform. I was the rapporteur for the subcommittee on penal reform. We spent 18 months looking at how best to reform the prison system, to look in particular at end-of-sentence strategies and how to ensure greater rehabilitation of prisoners. We had a report, we finished the report in February, and it was adopted unanimously by the full Justice Committee. We just launched it this morning, and it contains 5 practical, sensible and credible recommendations for improvement of the penal system. In particular, it recommends the adoption by government of a decarceration strategy to reduce prison numbers and to reduce the reliance on prison within the penal system generally. I would ask, Leader, that we might debate it in this House now that it's been published. I'd like to have the Minister for Justice in here. I know that the Justice Committee will also be engaging with them to seek the implementation of the recommendations in the report, but I'd really like to see us debate it here in the Seanad too. Quite a number of colleagues in the Seanad, including the last Cairlig, and Senator Conway and Senator Zappone were also on the subcommittee and were very active in the production of the report. So I think it would really be a good debate if we could have it. And finally, just on the insolvency guidelines, which clearly, have been, all that has been reported on is the draft guidelines, but certainly, and Niamh Connolly in the Sunday Business Post raised the concern that the draft guidelines may suggest that people who are paying out in childcare should give up jobs if the childcare costs are higher than the income. And I would just strongly disagree with any suggestion by any insolvency service or indeed any minister that anyone, man or woman, should have to give up work for that reason, because it is most short-sighted. Senator Van Turnout, I know, has spoken already about the value of early childcare, early childhood education. That's hugely important for children. It would be very wrong indeed if we were to suggest that because of insolvency guidelines people would be forced in some way to give up work. No parent should have to do that, and it would be utterly short-sighted because childcare costs are particularly high, as I know from personal experience, for preschool children, but that is only for the preschool years, and they reduce substantially when a child goes to school. It would be very short-sighted of any parent to give up work on the basis that for a short period of years the income they will earn is only slightly more or even slightly less than the cost of childcare. Long-term, the careers of clearly employment is far more valuable than that, and the idea that somebody should be forced to give up work on this basis, I think, is very wrong. Thank you.
Senator Van Turnout.
I too, on behalf of the independent group of senators, would very much like to pay tribute and to thank Jimmy Walsh. I don't have the longitude of memory of being here in the House. I'll only be here 2 years in May, but I did read Jimmy Walsh's accounts for many years before I came in here. But I had the opportunity to meet the legend when I first came to the House, and the thing I can say to you is to thank Jimmy most sincerely for his advice and his insights that he gave to me personally in the corridors. Certainly his journalistic skills are very apparent. He's able to get to the heart of an issue and understand what we're driving at. And I think he has given me personally great encouragement in my work as a senator, and encouraged me sometimes maybe to go a bit harder on issues. Maybe I go for consensus a little bit too much, but we'll leave that for another conversation. But Jimmy, even in this relatively short time that I know him, I really do feel I have made a real friend, somebody that can give you critical advice, but also in his articles in the papers, really explain what is happening here in the House. And I would like to just echo the tributes to Jimmy, even the short time that I know you. On the issue of early childhood education and care, quite simply, and Senator Batchik has said it, we need to decouple the issue. Early childhood education and care is about the child. It is not about the status of a parent, whether they're working or not working. We need to decouple this issue, and we need to have separate discussions. But the issue I'd like to raise today is on the issue of direct provision. Last Saturday, there was an excellent article in the Irish Times by Breed O'Brien, which was entitled "Inhumane Asylum Seeker System Needs Radical Reform." And today, again in the Irish Times, in the letters page, is a must-read for all of us. It is a marvellously accurate account of the harrowing system of direct provision that is offered in this country, and it's by Dr. Joan Gillard, who is a doctor who has worked in direct provision accommodation since 2007. So it's not hearsay, here's somebody who's worked in it. I've raised this issue several times in the Seanad, mainly through matters of adjournment. Because of this, I've taken it upon myself, and I was joined by my colleagues Senator Fiat McAneill and Senators Katz and Spone to visit the direct provision accommodation in Hatch Hall and the mobile home site, where we have 100 mobile home sites in Athlone, really at the back of the Department of Education in Athlone. And also I want to mention about the committed work by the all-party and no-party group in the Seanad of senators on this issue. So this isn't an issue that's about party politics. So I'm going to call on the leader to have a debate in the Seanad on the system of direct provision. And in particular, I would like to address the appropriateness of direct provision system for the welfare and development of the 1,725 children who are in a system of direct provision, not for 1 month, not for 2 months, but for several years. So if we want to talk about institutionalising people, we are doing it. And I also want to call on the establishment of an independent complaints mechanism and an independent inspection system of direct provision centres. This has been called for by the Government Special Rapporteur on Child Protection a year ago. We need to put this in place. So I call on the leader, let's have a debate on direct provision, and let's all of us really face this issue. It can no longer be tolerated. Or do we wait for 20 years for the next Ryan report on direct provision?
Margaret, Senator Paul Coughlin.
Margaret, Mr. Garrick. I think it's true to say that one of the most pleasant functions that has taken place in this House occurred yesterday when we saluted that great stalwart, Jimmy Walsh, in the private members' dining room. And I want to salute all the very fine words that have been said by all of my colleagues so far in tribute to him. And I think what happened yesterday was proper, correct, very nice and very fitting. And very ably chaired that function was by Fionnán Sheehan. He was a wonderful MC. And I think all of the words of Stephen Collins and yourself, Gaelic, and Morris Cummins here in front of me, and Fergal Quinn, and Michael O'Regan, they were all wonderful stories. And, you know, it was very true, I think, what was said. And there were wonderful anecdotes. I just hope that was recorded, because it was a very pleasant function. Apart from what has been said about Jimmy's accuracy, his superb note-taking, his wonderful shorthand, all of it very true. He's over 40 years service to these houses, having started the Irish press. And for me, I love the story that Michael O'Regan told, you know, of Frank Aiken's funeral, I think it was, when apparently all the Haugheyeites were lined up on one side, all the Colleyeites were on the other side. And whatever the arrangements were, the press corps had deputed Jimmy as the accurate note-taker to approach Mr. Haughey with the awkward question, and, you know, about the arrangements and what Mr. Colley got me go to the boat was to do. And of course, Jimmy was very well known to said Mr. Haughey from being in here. And Jimmy duly went up to him anyway, as we were told yesterday, and said, Mr. Haughey, asked him the question, and Mr. Haughey looked at him, bent ahead, and through those alleged hooded eyes, was that the count? And knowing Jimmy well, he said, and who the expletive deleted are you? Anyway, what I thought was highly amusing was the way Michael O'Regan recounted as to how the press, this wasn't reported at all apparently at the time, but today, as he said, and he named several papers, this would have been emblazoned in full Technicolor on the front page. And nothing would have been, there'd have been nothing left out. And then he wondered, turning to Stephen Collins, the bricklayer, I wonder how would our paper record that today? Perhaps we might say, that Mr. Hoy declined to comment in colourful language. Anyway, they were great stories. I just hope that all those anecdotes and stories are recorded somehow. We've all enjoyed many's the cup of tea in the bar with Jimmy over the years. And, you know, maybe, and I was delighted he was presented with this lifetime membership and that he will continue to come in here amongst us for as long as we're here. And now he made a joke himself about who'd be abolished first, Jimmy Walsh or Shannon. But anyway, I think what Jimmy should do is, Jimmy should record the anecdotes and stories, some of which he told, and many more that he didn't have time to tell us. And I wish him long life and happiness.
Margaret. I do acknowledge the appreciation and the time given to Jimmy Walsh, but I don't want ever speaking for 4 or 5 minutes on it. So, Senator Norris, it's your turn.
It's remarkable to hear how every time I stand up, the person in the chair prefaces by saying, I hope people won't speak too long.
I was Senator, I was admonishing the longevity of Senator, but I was also giving a little latitude to Senator Cochran because he's almost the father of the House.
Infallible, in my book. First of all, can I say that although I did say a few words about Jimmy Walsh last week, I welcome the fact to be able to say good things about him when he's actually here present in the House. In a degraded profession, he has maintained standards of an extremely high sort. And I think we need to value the meticulousness with which he recorded the doings of this House and his brave, long, and sometimes difficult fight to keep the paper of record on track in terms of recording the doings of this House. When I entered it 25 years ago, it was regularly covered by a panel of reporters from the Irish Times, and the doings of the Senate were given considerable coverage in every single paper in the state, the Independent, the Press, and so on. Now it's treated as a matter of no significance, and Honor Rock's report is shunted to the very end, a couple of minutes after all the committees. And I think that this is wrong. But I also think that the suggestion that was made that Jimmy should become Senator Walsh is not a bad one at all, because there is a vacancy. There may be another one if Senator Byrne wins a seat, but there is the seat of Martin McAleese. And Jimmy Walsh, although he was always very careful not to show any bias, it was a meticulous and clear recording of what happened, from personal conversations, I know the values that Jimmy has, and the humane, decent values of integrity. He believes very strongly in human rights on an international as well as a national level, and I think he would add very considerably through his political experience and his values to this House. I also would strongly support the suggestion that he write a book. And I don't think it should always just be about anecdotes. There's far more to Jimmy Walsh than funny stories and entertaining quips and all this kind of stuff. There is a substantial intellect there that parses and analyzes affairs at a national, international level. And I think that his wisdom and his insight, which for reasons of professionalism, he often kept outside the reports, which were reports. I think it would be very good to have the real Jimmy Walsh stand up and share those values because they are so necessary in this day and age. If I may pass on to a couple of other matters. First of all, the childcare business. I think there's a very clear situation here, and that is just the cost of childcare in this country is completely outrageous. It's ridiculous. You know, and to think that somebody with a child pays more than their mortgage to have a child looked after in a situation where there are a couple of dozen children is mad. Somebody should look at the cost of childcare provisions. That, in my opinion, is another matter. But the main thing I want to raise today, and I've signalled it to as many of my colleagues as I could, and mentioned it also to our leader, Maurice Cummins, is I referred last week to the lack of solidarity that's been shown from the highest in the land down to the lowest junior minister. And I believe it's important that the Senate plays its role in this. And I think we should be imaginative. And I think we should do something to demonstrate clearly and publicly that the members of this House feel and are in sympathy with the sufferings of the people of Ireland. And for that reason, I would like to propose that Shannon Aaron, in the new term after Easter, move its sitting for at least one day to a town like Athlone, which is in the centre of the city, or centre of the country, which was a very important radio broadcasting station, and which would be a kind of intermediate access for all senators. But I would suggest we come to Dublin, we go down in a bus to Athlone, and we hold our session there. We formally open Senate proceedings, and we also engage in an exercise of listening to the people. And I would suggest we then go and see the people in the situations they find themselves, whether it's a soup kitchen, an employment agency, whatever it is, so that we can have a real connection with the people. Now, I believe this is not precluded by anything in the Constitution or the rules of this House, and I think it has never been done by either House. And we in Parliament are seen as remote from the people. And I would like to ask respectfully of the leader to set in motion an inquiry to see how we can do this, because we would need to be prepared properly. We'd need to talk, for example, to the county council. Sorry, if I just finish on this, Lascilla, because I think it would be useful if we could use the county council offices in Athlone, and I think it also will get coverage and make us accessible to the people. So I make this suggestion. I'd be very interested to hear if my colleagues support this and if the leader is in a position to advance this matter.
I won't speak about Jimmy Walsh other than to say that he's pinching himself over there to know is he still alive, or is this a eulogy that he's listening to, such as was being said about him. So just thanks, Jimmy, for everything. I would like to stand today to relay some good news, which I think even the opposition will agree is good news. Yesterday in Boston, in America, a young man called Ronan Kelly became world champion Irish dancer for the third year in a row. On his way to being world champion, he won the Irish Championships and also the Scottish Championships. He's the son of our own colleague, Senator John Kelly, and there he is receiving his World Cup yesterday in Boston. I think it's fantastic. I understand.
And so you should know you're not supposed to display printed material in the House. But I'm very lenient in the order been allowing you to congratulate anyone, but I'd be...
Having done it, I apologise.
Yeah. Well,
I want to raise the issue.
That might be a cynical apology.
I'm not. It's not cynical. It's sincere, Cahirla. I want to raise the issue today, and I want to ask the leader to get clarity on an issue that I've raised on 2 occasions already here, and that's the issue of the loss of 17 million to credit unions across the country as a result of the IBRC Act. There has been toing and froing on this issue now for about 6 weeks, and in recent days the Fianna Fáil spokesperson on finance, Michael McGrath, has stated on the public airways that the Minister, under Section 9 of the IRBC Act, can instruct the Special Liquidator to act outside of the normal liquidation process to deal with this issue. The Minister has informed both the House and in the media that there is a particular fund called the Credit Union Restructuring Board Fund to assist credit unions, and that this matter can be referred to that board. It appears, Cathaoirleach, it appears that this fund is only to cover credit unions of which their funds drop below a certain amount of money. The credit unions that are affected will lose all except the first 100,000 of their money. The people that are affected by this are ordinary members of credit unions across the country in 16 credit unions, one of which is my own town. We need the Minister, and I'm asking the leader, to request the Minister to give us clarity on this matter once and for all, because the opposition, in fairness, say that there is a provision in the Act to deal with this. The Minister hasn't answered the question. We need an answer so that the credit unions can deal with this matter in whatever way they need to and move on. Thank you, Ciarán.
Senator Cullinane.
First of all, I want to wish Jimmy a very happy retirement. I hope he does enjoy his retirement. I'm sure he will go on to do a lot of different things, and maybe there is a great book in Jimmy. The three Sinn Féin representatives in the Seanad are here a short time, so we would not know Jimmy as long as maybe some of the people here who have been here for many, many years would. But for the short time we have been here, we have become friends. We will miss his wit and his banter and the gentle advice that he did give all of us. And he had an extraordinary way of giving advice in a gentle way, but at the same time getting the point across very, very strongly. And I will sincerely miss that, and I hope that he will make use of the pass that he has been given to come back and visit us. And there are maybe not, I don't think we could all stand up with integrity and say that about every single journalist. So I think when we do say it, it is sincere and it is genuine. He truly was impartial and he truly was genuine in what he did and represented the people of the state very well in covering the Seanad, and very few journalists have. So I would commend him for his work in that regard and wish him the very best of luck in his retirement. If I could just move on as well, Leader. Stupid decision, ham-fisted, unfair, a complete mess. These are some of the words that were used by Labour TDs and senators over the last number of weeks to describe the property tax. And I would agree with all of that. If you look at the extraordinary powers which have been given to a number of departments in relation to this property tax, the Department of Environment and Local Government, who can take money from people's grants, the Department of Agriculture, and the money can be taken from people's farming grants, Revenue Commissioners given extraordinary powers, the Department of Social Protection, they can take money from people's social welfare and people's pensions. One of the Labour senators yesterday asked us to celebrate the fact that granny flats will not be subject to a property tax, and that is good. But there are many grannies who own their own homes and granddads who will have to pay this unfair tax and simply don't have the money to do it. And I just want to put a direct question to the Leader of the House. I'm sure as a public representative, and every senator here in this House would, if they are doing constituency work and meeting constituents would say the same, that you're meeting people who are making tough decisions every single day about which bills to pay. They sit in our offices across from us with bills and say, which one do I pay? I can't cope. If they're on social welfare or low pay especially, they simply can't cope. They're going without heating oil, and we can see the temperatures out there. People need oil in their tanks, but they can't find the money to put into it. They can't find the money to pay utility bills. They are barely paying their mortgage, and many of them, as we know, are in mortgage arrears. And yet none of them are exempt from this tax. They're all being asked to pay, and the money simply isn't there. So my question to the Leader is, what advice would he give these people? Where are they going to get the money? And even those then who will defer, and the option of deferral is there for very low-income families, the government, in a very disgraceful and cynical way, is going to charge them interest of 4%, penalising low-paid people because they can't afford to pay. So I would again call for a debate on the property tax, because it is now the penny is dropping with many families that this is coming, and the unfairness of this tax is now being seen by more and more people. And we should have not just a debate on the property tax, but also on the alternatives to a property tax, in the way in which this government has brought in their property tax, and fairer ways to increase taxation. And I certainly would like for the Leader to arrange that debate as soon as is possible.
Senator Koch Keane.
Much indeed, and I spoke the last day on Jimmy Walsh, and so I won't dwell on it other than to say the very best to him in his retirement, and he has so much to offer indeed, and we're always talking about the lack of coverage from the media in the Senate, so maybe having somebody inside who actually knows the scene and how to do it best wouldn't be a bad idea at all. On the childcare issue, I have to speak on that because I've been speaking on it for the last 20 years in public, and I was on as I said, the first expert working group on childcare that was set up way back in the 90s, I think. So I have been involved in this area, and I do think it is a regressive step to have a minister say, you know, put any question or doubt. In fairness to Minister Varadkar, he did not say about women and childcare. It was on the economic issue, and it it would be interpreted gender neutral, and it was on the economy, on childcare. But I do agree with Senator Batchik and Senator Van Turnhout, who has said and have requested that childcare be decoupled, as Senator, I can't remember which senator said, from the economic decisions. Childcare is about a lot more than economics. Childcare is about society. And if we want a society to work, we have to have proper childcare. Now, some senator there asked for reports. We actually don't need any more reports. There are reports stacked high from the 1970s on childcare and the benefits in economic as well as social benefits. So it is not an economic decision. And social policy shouldn't be left to bankers. That's a government decision. And I think, you know, Minister Bradker is being misquoted when it says women. He didn't say women, and that's my interpretation of it. It was on the issue of childcare and economics. And I think, you know, every minister in government should come in behind Minister Francis Fitzgerald, who's doing a brilliant job. And if we look at the report here we had on childcare, all of the initiatives that would be implemented there, that would save the government money, absolutely brilliant. And every minister in the government and in opposition and everywhere else should come in behind Minister Fitzgerald there and the ideas that she has and support the childcare's initiatives that will put the country forward. And I want to say that I do think, you know, you can't blame ministers for being taken out of context as well, just on the gender issue. I raised today just on one issue.
Well,
okay, I'll leave it till tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. Senator Jimmy Walsh, because some people are already complaining because it's been so elongated on the whole issue of tributes to Jimmy Walsh, the journalist. I can see people already getting frustrated. When am I going to get in? So there's a lot of speakers yet, and it's going to be the longest order of business in the history of the House. Senator Jimmy Walsh.
This is only from our good Glasgow here. I realised actually in 1997 when I was first elected that I was really only an imposter as Jim Welch. I recall the count, in fact, and my family were manning the counting of the votes, and I must have been away in the bar or somewhere else when I got to the stage when I could relax at the count. But when I came back in, I was told that there was a man urgently looking to meet me, and but hadn't left his name. So I went away again, and I came back a second time, and that man had returned. But this time he had said he wanted to meet his namesake. I'm not even sure if we met at that count actually afterwards. But I got to know Jimmy Welch afterwards, and I must say, like all the members of this House, came to respect and indeed and like the genuineness of a reporter. And oftentimes there's a sense of suspicion with politicians dealing with people in the media, sometimes for good reason, let me say. But I think that Jimmy Welch stood out as a man who could be trusted, a man who had good views, and I think a man who, I have to say, I concur to some extent with Senator Norris. If he could be a member of this House, I would certainly like to welcome another Republican among our midst. We got to know each other's political views over the time, as I'm sure many other members have, in sharing various stories and anecdotes. I also got to know, indeed, some of my colleagues here who kept in frequent contact with Jimmy Walsh, because I often got messages from him on my telephone when I was on over in the 5-story block. Senator Norris was a particularly frequent caller, I'll have to say, and I always passed on his messages to Jimmy. But I'd like to join with others, indeed, in wishing Jimmy long life, health and happiness, and indeed, looking at how healthy and fit he is, I have no doubt that he will be among us for a long time to come, and I wish him well in the future. Can I just raise one issue on the order of business, Lascar, briefly, and it's the issue of political reform. There was some discussion last night, and we've concentrated in this House on Shannon reform, but it strikes me as if we could very usefully have a debate in this House on political reform within this democracy. It's actually extraordinary that 5 years after the biggest economic crash this country has ever seen, that there has been no focus on overall political reform. What we have are token gestures at reducing numbers of TDs by a very small number. Proposal to abolish the Shannon, abolish town councils. That is not political reform. That is, in fact, destroying and dismantling our political structures to absolutely no political or democratic benefit. Recently, and I want to focus on this, we had the Public Accounts Committee, probably the most important committee in this House, which got the two fingers from senior officials in the Department of Health, senior officials in the Department of Justice. It's an absolute disgrace. It's one thing to live under a political elite that have been elected, who maybe are out of touch, but it's an entirely different thing to live under bureaucrats who are unelected and who feel that they're above accountability to members of this House. Totally unacceptable. I would ask the leader for an urgent debate on this issue. It's fundamental to our society and to democracy in this country.
I'd like to join with other speakers in paying tribute to Jimmy Walsh. I'm also new to the House, but ever since I came to the House, he's been extremely encouraging, and as somebody said, he always gave a little advice which I took on board, and I would join with others who suggest that he does actually go ahead and write a book. There's often talk like this, but I do hope that he actually undertakes a project in this regard that I think we'd all benefit from, and I think humour is no harm. But it could have both, perhaps, Senator Norris, some humour and some facts to lighten. Okay, yeah, there's a plug for your own book. But just with regard to the childcare issue, I just wanted to join, especially with Senator Keane, with regard to her comments. I think it would be a regressive move for this country to move in a direction where we didn't see the social and lifestyle aspects that are so important to working. Obviously, people work for money. That goes without saying. But I think that there's a much wider issue when it comes to people working, and it's not all about women. And I'm getting tired, frankly, of women being singled out in this type of a scenario, because it shouldn't be. It should be a gender-neutral situation. And the fact that the bankers who contributed so majorly to our economic downfall in this country would be making decisions on policy, as Senator Keane has said, is absolutely outrageous. Thank you.
Senator McOneill.
I also want to endorse what my colleague Senator Van Turnhout said about Jimmy Walsh. Again, I'm a relatively new senator, but I just want to acknowledge Jimmy Walsh's journalistic ability, particularly in being able to write one sentence what takes senators 50 sentences to say, and it's created an art form itself, so I acknowledge that. I would like to acknowledge that today is World Theatre Day, a day, in my view, that Ireland can be proud to support since it existed in 1961. I would ask the leader to support my call to all of us here today to salute the many actors, playwrights, designers, technicians all over Ireland who have contributed to the reputation of Ireland in their craft and vocation of making and presenting theatre across the world and across Ireland. Theatre is over 2,000 years old, and yet it continues to be supported by audiences and communities across the nation. It is a tough time for our actors and our writers as they try to make a living like many other citizens and to survive and contribute to society through their important medium. I would ask all of you here today to go and see a professional production by any Irish theatre company over the next few weeks to support our theatre artists. I've just come from a briefing given by Dr. Abdel Fattah Absfour, which was arranged by Maureen O'Sullivan TD, who is president of the Palestinian Theatre League and founder of Al Ruwad, a theatre company in Palestine. He works in his own native land of Palestine, which is occupied by Israel and has no designated official nationality. He has worked and does work with young people and theatre and calls it a beautiful resistance. And it shows how theatre and arts can continue to be important in telling stories and bearing witnesses across the world. I would just like to remind senators that our motion this afternoon on philanthropy and fundraising, it is an important motion and one that I hope all senators will contribute. Today, there is a major conference on fundraising in Dublin with over 300 people in attendance. I note last Cahirirlig that the Cabinet has accepted a proposal from the Minister for the Environment, Phil Hogan, that new rules to encourage philanthropy should be considered. I would like to ask the Leader, can he elaborate on this before we debate the motion this afternoon?
Senator Whelan.
And out of respect for the Chair and the time constraints, I'm going to park up an issue that I intended to raise and just stick solely to my first opportunity to commend and pay congratulations to Jimmy Walsh. I've known Jimmy for many years, and I count him as a colleague, as a journalist myself of 30 years. I'm only in the penny halfpenny place, really, to Jimmy, who is 52 years on the clock. And although you wouldn't think it to look at him or meet him, or when you see his sharpness of intellect and intent and his level of energy and his commitment and passion for the job that he still has, you don't see that in too many jobs. I don't think Jimmy would mind me saying that he is probably old school, and I say that in the best sense of the word. And I've always looked up to him and the standards that he upheld, the standards of fairness and honesty and accuracy. And while we do know Jimmy is a highly opinionated and perhaps sometimes argumentative man, I've never found at any occasion when he worked with the Irish Press or the Irish Times that it filtered into his copy or was reflected in any way in any sort of bias or any sort of strain or spin. Although you learn something new every day in the Senate, and I am a little bit taken aback to learn that Jimmy has been acting behind my back as a sort of a spin doctor to some of the Taoiseach's nominees. So that is a bit of a revelation, which I'll be taking up with him at a later stage. I also, Jimmy is also unique and peculiar, perhaps in society, but especially as a journalist, that he has no mobile phone, and yet manages to survive in the jungle, that has become modern journalism, and still hasn't missed a deadline or a story of any note. So. Indeed. And just to finish up, I'm certain Jimmy has a good book, if not a great book, and a bestseller in him. But knowing the calibre and integrity of the man, it will not turn out to be a kiss and tell. Thanks very much,
Senator Fergal-Quinn.
I can't let it pass without a few words about Jimmy Walsh as well. I've been here 20 years, so I'm well experienced in knowledge, and I've always been impressed at his ability to be able, and so succinct, to be able to remember and jot down exactly what was said, sometimes in a very mumbled voice, on occasions very loud, but being able to meet him in the corridor afterwards and say, can you tell me exactly, or he said, can you tell me exactly what you said, and knew it, had written it down and memorized it so well. I was impressed when I heard so many wish him well in the future, that he will be well in the future, because I hadn't realized until yesterday how fit a man he is. When I heard some of the stories about his running, his ability to jog, and also to run very fast as well. 2 hours every morning before he comes to work here in walking and striding out. He makes a show of the rest of us. Long may he live, and long may he have that same energy and commitment that he's shown to us in those last 52 years. I can't believe that. Later, some years ago, I think it's 4 years ago, I introduced a bill here on organ donation. And I mention it again today because I'd like you to check out and see, could this bill be reintroduced now? The reason is we stopped with 2 minutes to go because the minister at the time said she wished to consult on regard to this. By the end of that year, the bill had been dropped. We haven't heard anything since, and that's 4, if not 5 years ago. I'd love to think that we can do something about it. This is the opt-out system. In other words, that everybody, we assume unless you opt out, that you're willing to have your organs donated to save lives. I believe it's worthy of consideration. I believe the same bill that was introduced that few years ago could be reintroduced again. I'd like to get your advice on it, and maybe you could check with the Minister to see whether that would be the right way to go. I just had one other word of congratulations to Minister for appointing Christoph Muller to the position of Chairman of An Post. I think it's a brilliant suggestion. I think it's very worthy. I think it's a man who's clearly a very successful business person, but also very successfully has got the experience in that particular way of life before he came to Ireland. I believe that that's an exemplary and exactly the perfect man for the job. Well may he succeed.
Margaret, Senator Comiskey.
Laska Hirlock, and I want to join with my colleagues too in wishing well to Jimmy Walsh on his retirement. I'm not very long here, just less than 2 years, as some of my colleagues have said already. You know, any time that we met Jimmy, we got to know him very quick, and we met him in the hallways, and we always got that friendly smile and that bit of advice. So I wish him well too, like all of the rest. What I want to do this morning is I want to welcome the news that the Minister, Alan Shatter, has agreed to send in helicopters to the farmers in Northern Ireland that have great difficulty because of the bad weather. And this is very good news that we will help our friends and help our neighbours. I suppose the farming community have gone through a very tough time over the last number of, well, the last year was very difficult, and the last number of weeks has been extremely bad, and particularly for those people in Northern Ireland. So it's good to see that cooperation between North and South. It's something that I have called for down through the years, that there should be more cooperation, you know, on animal health issues, and now that the farmers are in difficulty. So that's good news. Thanks very much.
Very good. Senator Wilson.
Here, look, and sometimes we're accused of having a lot of hot air in this chamber. It's certainly not coming from the radiators this morning anyway. Maybe somebody could look at that. I join with other colleagues in paying tribute to Jimmy Walsh. I've got to know Jimmy over the last 11 years, and he is, exactly as has been stated here by a number of colleagues, very accurate and balanced and courteous. And I think the two words, gentleman Jim, will rest very easily on your shoulders, Jimmy, and I wish you well in your retirement. Could I second Senator Norris' proposal that we take into account the fact that a lot of people around the country think that we do very little in this House. I think his proposal that we, for one day, would go to some place like Athlone and sit in Athlone, so as the general public could come and see exactly what we do and afford us the opportunity to listen to what concerns are in that community, and indeed, as Senator Norris suggested, maybe go around and visit certain areas that we may not get to see in our ordinary day lives, most of us anyway. I think it's a very, very worthwhile suggestion. If we can do it, we should do it. That's what I would say here today. I rise primarily this morning to defend the Taoiseach of our country. I'm disappointed to read in the front of one of our national newspapers that one of the coalition partners have chosen to personally attack the Taoiseach. Now, while most of us on this side of the House would disagree with many of the decisions that the government has taken, the Taoiseach is merely the chairman of the Cabinet. And that Cabinet consists of Labour and Fine Gael ministers. Whether the Labour Party want us to believe it or not, they are responsible as much as Fine Gael for any decision that the government takes. And I'm disappointed that the Labour Party have chosen to personally attack the Taoiseach, who's chairman of the Cabinet, in order to prevent themselves ending up fourth in the Meath East by-election. I'm very disappointed with that. And again, could I just very briefly ask the Leader to invite the Minister for Justice into this House and to be discussed here with him openly and frankly the difficulties that continue in An Garda Síochána. As Senator McSharry alluded to in his contribution, 4 members of the Garda Sergeants and Inspectors who walked out during the Minister's speech, and the Garda Commissioner, who obviously is just a mouthpiece for the Minister, they are to be disciplined for democratically representing in the only way they can the members of their organisation that were mandated by the Cabinet District of An Garda Síochána to do what they have done. And I think it's a sad day if they're going to be disciplined for taking democratic action in the only way that they can. Thank you.
Well, Margaret. Senator Hayden.
Thank you very much, Laska Hirlock. First of all, can I just reassure Senator Wilson, whom I know is very concerned about the future of this government, that there is absolutely no discordant notes between the partners involved in this particular coalition, irrespective of what any of the national newspapers were not noted.
I've seen the leaflet. I've seen the leaflet.
May I say, Senator Wilson? Absolutely. Damned if we do and damned if we don't, as they say, but that's not why I'm on my feet. I'm on my feet, like others, to pay tribute also to Jimmy Walsh, and to say that, like others, as a new senator to this House, I've only met him since I came here, and just to say that he has been not just a friendly face, but a fountain of information. And I noted that on one occasion I stood up in the order of business and I made a statement about a particular historical date. He met me in the corridor outside the chamber and said, yes, you got the sentiment right, but the date wrong. So he has not just a knowledge of this House and its workings, but an intimate knowledge of international history. He's indeed a wonderful man. And as I was listening to the tributes to him yesterday, and particularly his own reminiscences about his time as a correspondent here, I was definitely struck by the thought, there is a book in this. And I actually think it's not necessarily a seat in the chamber he needs, but an office somewhere in Leinster House so that he can write that book. My one worry is that once Jimmy Walsh has left us, that this House will not even get the coverage that it has been getting. And I think it behoves all the national newspapers in this country to take on board the inadequacy of coverage of the Irish Seanad. Just two issues I'd like to raise very briefly. One is I agree with Senator McSherry yet again that we need a debate on the personal insolvency provisions once they're introduced. They are, and this entire process has been shrouded in mystery. And I meet people on a daily basis who don't know what's happening, what will be covered, what won't be covered. People in this country are deeply distressed and they need certainty. And I am not comforted by the attitude of the banks towards the Mars process, where there is no transparency, there is no real certainty about who can avail of the measures, what those measures are. The banks respond by saying it's on a case-by-case basis. To my mind, something being on a case-by-case basis simply means a lack of transparency and nobody knows where they stand. In relation to the other issue, which also relates to the personal insolvency legislation, and that was the purported comments of Minister Leo Varadkar. I don't actually agree with other senators that this is about childcare. It's about the position of women in Irish society. I noted that it wasn't men who would give up their jobs to stay at home if the costs of childcare exceeded their incomes. And I know, as a lot of women do, that there is no doubt if you leave the workforce at a particular moment in time, not only are your career opportunities reduced, but also your options for pension and other financial benefits are severely reduced. So could I just say that I would like to see a debate, leader, on the position of women in Irish society in a wider context. And could I ask that Minister Varadkar be asked to come in and take that debate?
For Margaret, Senator Columbo.
I too would like to join in the tributes to Jimmy Walsh for his contribution which he's made over the last 40 years. I think it's important that in any democratic system, it's important that you have a very good and fair media, and I think he has made a huge contribution to the democratic process in the way he has reported the matters in this House over a long number of years and in the Oireachtas overall. And I just wish him every happiness in his retirement. Could I just touch on something which Senator Norris raised? And I just want to give the impression, I don't want the impression go out here that members are totally disconnected from the general public. And I'm sure you will agree with me, Lasca, here, look, if Senator Norris went down to your constituency any weekend, I'm sure your work down in your constituency, you're very much in touch with the ordinary people down there. Likewise with Senator Cullinan down in Waterford, and likewise I'm saying to Senator Norris, if he wants to spend a weekend down in Cork with me in Cork North Central, he's very welcome to do so. Because I just want to give, I don't want the impression to go out here that we as senators are disconnected. I would say 80% of the people that come into my constituency office are dealing with social welfare issues. And just on social welfare, this government is not disconnected. In the last 2 years since we've come into government, we've given out an additional 251,000 medical cards. 165,000 additional medical cards in the last 12 months alone. So this government is not disconnected with what's happening out there at the present time. Finally,
disagree with you.
Finally, last look.
To conclude without interruption, please.
Finally, last look. The fact is 165,000 additional medical cards were given out last year. That's the fact. That's clear evidence that this government is not disconnected with what's happening out there with the general public. Finally, can I just touch on one final matter, and that's in relation to the insurance industry. The insurance industry are complaining that there's a 5% increase in claims and that this may incur higher cost of insurance. I think it's an outrageous statement coming from the insurance industry when the level of costs in overall terms, and in particular to the legal profession, have reduced by over 50 to 60% over the last 5 years. And to suggest that increase in claims is no justification for the increase in the cost of insurance is outrageous and should be seriously contested. And I think if there was, it's a matter that we should have a debate on in this House in relation to the cost of insurance, and in particular where the insurance industry has opted out when it feels like to, when it feels it wants to, in relation to house insurance, where property which hasn't been flooded but maybe subject to flooding, they're now opting out completely. And I think, you know, the insurance industry are cherry picking now, and there's no justification for a suggestion that there should be an increase in insurance costs.
Very good. Senator O'Clougherty.
That's entirely, and I mentioned Jimmy Walsh last week, but I'd also like to extend an invitation to him this week, because I understand that if he has time in his hands, he's interested in improving his Irish, and he's welcome in Connemara anytime he wants to try and do that. I would like to also support the call by Senator Van Turnout on the issue of direct provision. I too have visited the centres of direct provision in a number of places. I think it's a serious issue, a very, very serious issue. We've raised it a number of times on the adjournment. It's a very complex issue, and I think the letter in today's Irish Times puts it very succinctly. And it has actually been compared in many cases to the state of the Magdalen laundries. And I do think we have a potential scandal on our hands which we'll have to have an investigation into if we don't do something quite quickly. But on the Magdalen laundry issue, one of the moments that actually sparked the whole debate on that, from my recollection, was a play by Patricia Burke-Brogan called Eclipsed. And that leads me to the second point, that today is World Theatre Day, and the power of theatre should not, and the art should not be underestimated. And I'd agree with all of the sentiments echoed by Senator McAneill, and that we need to support the theatre and the arts communities in Ireland. And I think it has been quite a while since we've had a debate in the Seanad on the arts, and I think it would be very useful if we could have the Minister in. On the back of the presentation this morning by Dr. Abdel Fattah Abbas-Rour, and also on the back of the Gleach by the President, to call on all of us to see how we can use the culture, the language, the music, the arts to try and put our country forward. And I think a debate on that, particularly in the times of difficult financial situation that we're in, how our art is faring through these times, I think it would be very useful. So,
Senator Gilroy.
There are many things I'd like to talk about this morning on the order of business, but I'm going to confine myself to joining my colleagues in paying tribute to Jimmy Walsh, whose retirement is upon us. Jimmy is there's no house, this house or any other house could contain Jimmy Walsh or the knowledge that he contains, and he can be best described probably as a storehouse of knowledge, but he's a storehouse of a different type, because his knowledge is matched only by his willingness to share it, and the number of encouraging and kind words that he has given me and many other of my colleagues, no doubt, over the last 2 years since we came in here has encouraged me greatly and led me to strive to be a better senator, and that's absolutely down to Jimmy. Jimmy is a great writer. His articles have been authoritative and pithy and insightful. So he is a great writer. But more importantly than being a great writer, Jimmy's a great fella, and he's a decent fella. And I want to salute him here in the strongest possible terms and wish him the very, very best, Jim, in your retirement. I genuinely mean that.
For Margaret, Senator Daly.
Here, Jimmy would often stop you in the corridor and give you a nice word of encouragement, and for that, Jimmy, I thank you. But I suppose, and you've often given us advice, and I suppose the advice I would give you on your retirement is the secret to a happy retirement is how to spend time without spending money. And if you can crack that particular nut, please let us know. I asked the leader to organise a debate in relation to the issue of the undocumented Irish in the United States. In April, the Senate and the Congress are going to put forward proposals in relation to legislation to solve the issue of not only the 50,000 undocumented Irish, but the nearly 12 million undocumented in the United States. And last week, the Taoiseach was in Capitol Hill. He had an audience of Republican and Democratic congressmen and senators. The press release that was sent out by the Department of Foreign Affairs, and on his speech said that he would raise the issue.
of the undocumented Irish, and when you're in a room with the people that matter, I'm sure that's what you should do, is raise the issue. And yet we see from the transcripts from the White House that in fact the issue was not raised by the Taoiseach in front of the leader of the Republicans in Congress or at any stage during his speech. And I'd ask the leader, maybe he would ask the Minister for Foreign Affairs to come in before the Seanad and explain why, when we have this opportunity of St. Patrick's Day, that we do not press home our concerns in relation to the situation for the undocumented Irish in the United States. We continually preach to the choir in that we keep talking to those who are on board the train and who want to see the issue solved for the undocumented Irish in the US, yet we don't engage with those Republicans who have concerns in relation to the issue of those who are undocumented in their constituencies. So I'd ask the leader to organise a debate on the topic, and maybe he could find out why the issue wasn't raised at the appropriate time on Capitol Hill. Thank you for hearing.
Senator Mullins.
I too want to join in the good wishes to Jimmy Walsh. Certainly with all the tributes this morning, I would say he'd be seriously tempted to go into politics, and I think he certainly would win the popular vote, certainly amongst the members of this House. Jimmy is a thorough gentleman. I think he's a one-off, and he has given outstanding service to democracy and indeed to journalism in his coverage of the activities of the Oireachtas down through his long and illustrious career. And I too want to wish him a long and happy and above all a very healthy retirement, and to encourage him, which I did yesterday after the very fine presentation and enjoyable function yesterday afternoon. I encouraged him to write that book, and I sincerely hope he does just that. I want to join very much this morning, very briefly, in the call for a thorough debate in this House on the direct provision, and to join with Senator Van Turnout and Senator O'Clougherty. This is a very expensive system which does not appear to be serving the people that it was designed to serve. It's not serving them very well. I think we need to investigate it, to have a thorough debate on the merits or otherwise of this particular system. And I would hate to think that in years to come we would have any inquiry to investigate how this system failed the people it was intended to support. So I hope that the leader would find time in the next session to facilitate that debate.
Before I call on the leader, I just would like to pay my own brief tribute to Jimmy Walsh. I have known Jimmy, I suppose, for a long time. I'm in the House approximately 18 years, and I've become, I think, a friend of his, and we've often exchanged ideas and chats and whatever. I'm not quite sure if Jimmy would see fit to accept the proposal that he would accept the nomination of this House, because I think if that were the case and he did accept it, he could find himself here, the lily amongst the briars. Jimmy is the type of journalist that never played a man, in my view, from my knowledge of him and from reading his articles. He always played the ball and was very fair. I think many young journalists, and maybe not so young, would do very well to study and emulate what Jimmy has achieved in journalism. Jimmy Walsh's contribution to journalism and his adherence to high standards, to fairness, to decency, it was something that sticks out very strongly, because low standards in journalism, in my view, are as pathetic and as damaging and demeaning to society as low standards in politics, and we're often criticised for that. I would consider Jimmy to be a gentleman, a scholar, and a good judge of whisky. And I would also like him to wish him many more laps of Marley Park and a very happy retirement. And I hope that when Jimmy retires from journalism, that he will occupy himself, maybe in, somebody said write a book, but I would also very much welcome that he come back here sometime when the straitjacket of his work is not upon him, and that we might, as a group, or some of the members here who have known him a long time, might have a social occasion with him, maybe a meal to join us, something I would like to do. But that's just a suggestion. So with those few words to Jimmy, I wish you the very best in your retirement. I'm quite certain that we will meet again, our paths will cross. I sometimes walk in Marley Park, but I don't think I could keep up to you. And I now ask the leader to conclude this very lengthy order of business, but I think a very deserving one in the occasion of our journalist friend Jimmy Walsh's retirement.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach.